All I have in this world is my balls and my word, and I don't break them for no one. Do you understand?
Rightio legends, Chaos Chronicles, and we're back again with another video. And so today I thought I'd add another video to our Underbelly's Most Feared. And so today we're doing a video on probably is like up there with our most asked, so Rodney Collins. So before I get into it, if you haven't already subscribed, please jump down there, shoot me a subscription. That'd be absolutely appreciated. And if you hit that bell icon, you'll never miss any of my clips again. All right. So who was Rodney Collins? So he was alleged to have been a very active hitman for Carl Williams, and so he's alleged to be responsible for 9 bodies, but the ones that he's most known for was the killer of the Hodson. So the Hodson, so Terrence Hodson and his wife that were murdered in their own house. So we will get into that, but before that, let's get into a little bit backstory on Rodney Collins. So, all right. So police say that 3 of those 9 people that he killed were females that could identify him. So the only reason that he killed these 3 females is because they could have identified him as the murderer. So in 2009, he was sentenced to 32, 32 years to life. So 32 years on the bottom, but life on top. And this was for the murder of Raymond Abbey and Raymond Abbey's wife. So it's believed that what took place there was that Rodney Collins took Raymond Abbey into the shed of his own house, so Raymond's own shed, and then shot him. So before he actually died, he was able to yell out the killer's name. And so he was shot in the head 3 times. So somewhere in between getting shot once and getting shot 3 times, he yelled out Rodney Collins' name. And so then Rodney Collins then just walked inside and then killed his wife as well. And so, you know, when even when the police asked him why he killed the wife, he said, dead people tell no tales. And like, that is just absolutely like crazy. But like, what's even more crazy is that when he was arrested for the murders of Rodney and his wife, so he was found with a loaded handgun, he was found with a balaclava, but he was also found with a 58 confidential police report on one of Melbourne's biggest drug dealers at the time. And yeah, so like, he's always been way up there with like the top echelon of hitmen in Melbourne. So he was also suspect number 1, the police say, in another husband and wife killing. So de facto partners. They weren't married, but they were de facto. So Mike Lucky Chavella and his de facto partner, Heather McDonald, were both killed in very, very similar circumstances. So the husband was killed first and then the wife was killed afterwards. So the police say that this particular one was a drug deal gone wrong, and so it was a deliberate rip-off. And so he went there to rip these people off and to kill them. And so that's absolutely what happened. And so, like, I think it just blows my mind that once again, you know, Rodney Collins is, you know, prime suspect number 1 in another husband and wife killing. And like, you know, people often say that Andrew Veneman was the most busiest hitman in the whole underworld saga, the underbelly saga, whatever you want to call it, the Melbourne underbelly stuff. But people would argue that Rodney Collins was definitely way up there as a very 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 active hitman. And so, but he also had a pretty good name in prison as well. And as you can imagine, he's got crimes dating back to the 70s. So, like, as you could probably imagine, he was a pretty feared name in prison as well. So, not so much for like fighting and stuff like that, but he was a pretty feared man in the Victorian prison system as well. And like, because of his reputation on the outside at putting bodies in the ground, that not many people wanted to mess with old Rod Collins. I can tell you that right now. All right. So in February 1983, so he shot and killed a young Irishman, Patrick Coughlin. So who was probably too young and too drunk to know what was going on at the time, and then to sense the danger even. And then Rodney also turned the gun on that young Irishman's young mate and shot that other young guy in the leg. And so yeah, he was arrested over this. And he was arrested by the SOG. And so when the SOG actually came to arrest him, so he had at the house where he was living at the time, so it was actually suggested that he was living with Danielle Maguire, so the ex-wife, girlfriend of Tony Mockbell, so her mum at the time. So the SOG, so it took him several minutes to get into the house because he had these plastic sheets that was over, he put like a plastic film over each window. And so the police came to smash the window and like was stopped for several minutes. So actually what happened, so when they arrested him, they found once again, so he had a balaclava, he had a firearm that had every single bullet in it spent. And so he said that when the police arrested him and said, why did you shoot at us? Why did you, empty a whole round of the gun at us? He said that he did not know that it was the police that he was shooting at.
The identity of a notorious hitman, who's also a suspect in many more killings, can now be revealed after the Supreme Court lifted suppression orders today. Rodney Collins has a criminal history spanning 50 years for offences including rape and murder. And as Sarah Farnsworth reports, he's one of the main suspects in the high-profile yet unsolved killing of Terence and Christine Hodson.
For years, he's been the mystery hitman. But this is Rodney Collins, a career criminal with more than 50 convictions to his name. Now 67 years old, Collins is the man responsible for the double murders of Raymond and Dorothy Abbey at their Heidelberg West home in 1987. He shot Raymond Abbey 3 times in the head, believing him to be a police informer. And then he killed his wife, while their children remained close by. His sentence for the cold-blooded execution landed him in jail until he's 98. Collins is also suspected of carrying out the 2004 murders of police informer Terence Hodson and his wife Christine. It was alleged he was the killer hired by drugs boss Carl Williams for the hit. Williams told police Collins accepted the job for $150,000 without even knowing who the target was. Murder charges against Collins were dropped after Carl Williams was killed in prison. In the latest twist, prison rumours about Collins providing information to police have made him unpopular with other inmates. Last year, he was sporting a black eye, but kept the criminal code of silence and refused to say how he'd been injured. Sarah Farnsworth, ABC News, Melbourne.
So believe it or not, the charges against him, so the only person that knew what happened between him and those young Irishmen were those three people. And so one of them was already dead. So believe it or not, the person that he shot in the leg died from complications from being shot in the leg. And then the charges were ultimately dropped against Rodney Collins for this. And so, you know, once again, got away with it. And just unbelievable. Like, if you ask me, I would imagine that there's a little bit more behind that young man dying from complications to being shot in the leg. Now, I'm not saying that I know anything. I'm absolutely not saying that. But I'm just saying the cunningness of Rodney Collins, like, it just, I would not put it past him. So as you guys know, I done that video as well on Brian Kane, or the Kane brothers. So it was famously known that in 1982, Brian Kane was shot and killed in the Quarry Hotel in Brunswick. So, it is believed that it was Rodney Collins, and his partner in crime was believed to be Russell Mad Dog Cox. And so, it's widely believed, and he was in the, like, process of being charged with those at the time of his death. So, Rodney Collins actually died in prison, and, died from some kind of health complications. I don't know. But, so, also, it is well known that he was responsible for the Hodson, so Terence Hodson and his wife. So the similarities to the other people that were killed, so the husband killed and then the wife killed because, they could identify him. And so, Carl Williams went on to say in statements, so Carl Williams was testifying against Rodney Collins and another police officer. So, but he said at this time that Rodney Collins was always asking for work and was definitely his most active, hitman at the time. So at the time, you can imagine Carl had just been given 32 years or whatever it was, 32 years to life. And so he was desperate to make a deal. And so he started opening his mouth on what he knew about the Hodson murders, and said that he was the middleman between a police officer that handed Carl Williams the money, and then Carl Williams handed the money off to Rodney Collins. Now, famously, as we all know, Carl Williams was killed at Barwon Prison in 2010. And so at this time, those two people, so Rodney Collins and that police officer, had been charged with murder and were placed at Barwon Prison. And so, because Carl Williams was famously killed in 2010, and this is probably a large reason why he was, killed at the time. And so, because he was killed, the whole case against Rod Collins and the police officer fell through. So that whole case was absolutely dropped. And so, still to this day, no one has been charged over the Hodson killings. So it was well known that Terence Hodson was a police informer and was informing to the police about, all the underworld killings and other underworld ill-gotten gains and whatnot. And so this is why he had a contract put out on his life. But like the other ones, I just think it's crazy that, and even like he said, dead man tell no tales. And in 6 of the murders that he was accused of, like, he killed the wives just because they could have identified him. So, it is 100% that Rodney Collins, like, if you ask me, was probably one of the most active hitman in the Melbourne Underbelly series. If not if not one of the most, he probably was the most active. And so also, you know, it is famously known that he was one of the people that was charged for killing Mario Condello. So, you know, it's just absolutely undeniable that this guy deserves a place in, you know, the Underbelly's Most Feared series that I'm doing at the moment, because like this guy was absolutely probably one of the most busiest hitmans that I've ever heard about, and, you know, had no problem in putting bodies in the ground. And you know, he probably was going to be facing plenty more charges as, you know, things were starting to heat up, and, you know, more evidence was starting to pile up against all these, you know, bodies that were starting to pile up since the 70s and 80s and, you know, 90s, and then the Underbelly gangland wars. So, you know, he was going to be spending the rest of his life in prison anyway. But there you go, guys. Rodney Collins, one of the most feared people in the Melbourne underworld at the time, without a doubt. So, yeah, there you go, guys. If there's anyone else that you would like me to do a video on, chuck it down there in the comment section of this video, and I will do my utmost best to get to it. I have been the Chaos Chronicles. What do? We talk about everything prison, crime, Australian prison, and everything there alike. If you haven't already subscribed, take this time to jump down there, shoot me a subscription. I have been the Chaos Chronicles. You guys have been absolutely awesome. Don't do drugs and crime and you won't end up in prison. We out.
The Chaos Chronicles, where the darkness thrives. True tales of madness, where the spirit survives.